there's managers and executives are constantly talking about talent gaps and not being able to find enough people for engineering or for finance or for data analysis types of roles.
Welcome to Beyond Borders, New York Edition, a Multiplier talk series that brings together global first thought leaders and entrepreneurs to discuss the future of work. In this episode, we explore how global hiring and employer of record solutions are transforming recruitment.
I want to set the stage of global employment broadly. Has it gone up? Has it gone down? Why don't you give me a broad overview of like what's been going on the past decade or so?
Yeah, so we've seen significant evidence that this is going up, and we've seen it in a lot of different countries in terms of the hiring from U.S. firms. Many companies are seeing kind of 50% year over year increases. Of course, it kind of started in 2020, I think, spiking up. But this was something that was trending before that, where companies were finding good talent that was able to work remotely for work that they were able to really outline the parameters for and the outcomes that they were looking for. And so it's been an expansion of freelancing as well as full-time employment. And we're seeing it in a lot of different parts of the world as well.
And then you have some sort of multiplier specific stats on this. Like, what have you guys seen?
What have we seen? Yes. Specifically over the last 4 years, we've seen a 4 times increase in the number of accountants being employed via Multiplier outside of the United States. And within the engineering and tech space, we've seen a 10 times increase over the last 4 years too.
So jobs that were once thought of as sort of like American jobs can be hired outside more frequently. Okay. And you mentioned this, but like the initial cause of this growth or the initial like bump up in this was the pandemic. What else was going on? You said pandemic and...
I mean, I think there's the pandemic, there's managers and executives are constantly talking about talent gaps and not being able to find enough people for engineering or for finance or for data analysis types of roles. So really addressing talent gaps, as well as even moving into new markets. So if you want to move into a new market, you previously probably had to go into a joint venture or maybe even do an acquisition. And now that's a little bit easier too. But yeah, that big thing was the acceptance of remote work growing at a massive amount because of the pandemic and lockdown. But once people got an idea that, this remote work thing doesn't break everything, I think they started thinking, okay, where can we use this, continuously and also apply it to locational independence, which people really want as well.
Picture medium-sized business in Kansas City, and they are also trying to look for talent, but the talent pool that they are constraining themselves to is right there. And sooner or later, businesses will be obliged to start saying, all right, I need someone who is not in Kansas. And as you start going further and further with the technological advancements available today, it's not a stretch of the mind to hire someone in Canada to start with, And it's really that. It's not so much the saying like, oh, we have no talent or we want to eliminate all jobs in Kansas. It's a case of, hey, maybe the 9th accountant on the team need not be in Kansas.
And let's step back a little bit. I want to kind of paint a picture for our audience here. Like, what was hiring like exactly, let's say 10 years ago in 2015? Like, what did it look like? You'd like just run through like quickly, like the process of hiring in 2015 versus like 2025. I just want to see like side by side.
Happy to share insights, by the way. I was in that space in US, in UK and in Singapore, and up till 2012, in UK people were still publishing ads on newspapers. Up till 2015 in Asia Pacific, Singapore specifically, all job ad vacancies were on newspapers. Job boards were just about breaking through. LinkedIn became popular by end of 2015 onwards in Asia. In US, it became popular after 2010.
With the advent of LinkedIn.
So
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn,
digital marketplace for job posting.
Absolutely.
Communication, yeah.
So talent discoverability became much more common after 2015, 2016, where you can say, all right, most white-collar people in the world today are on a common platform that allows them to be found and to interact with potential employers.
I would just add, the hiring process itself maybe has not changed that much. You just send in an application, you send your resume,
and AI rejects it.
You do some behavioral, AI, that's been happening for 10, 15 years. And then you do some behavioral interviews, and then the 3-4 people who did those interviews decide what the vibe was. So There probably is some room for recruiting to get sharper, but obviously like virtual recruiting plays a larger role in this. When you're hiring someone from far away, you can't fly them into the office as easily.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about that, like the sort of challenges then, like, how do you, the discoverability, how do you, you find people on LinkedIn, but like, how do you make them trust you in order to take your job across the world?
I think that's one of the biggest, toughest parts about it, because you want to have a aligned vision for what the job is. You want that person to feel welcomed within the company. And those are all things you have to do very intentionally when you are remote versus when you were in person together 5 days a week in the same position. And so I think, companies really need to think about how do you recruit, vet, but also like welcome and onboard so that those people stay on for a long time, because it can be really easy to switch jobs when you're able to get onto a job so easily, right? You just send your computer home.
So true, so true. But again, I think I just wanted to bring it back to something more recent. Up till 2015, 2016, Skype was the only option available for video conferencing. Microsoft launched Teams, and that became, I would say, operationally ready in 2019. So it was really up
Your
to
timing.
2019, just before COVID happened, they launched it, and then everybody was forced to use it, and it became a pretty decent product. But without video conferencing tools that was stable and strong, we wouldn't be able to have a fluid conversation enough to have that trust to get into a job relationship. So prior to 2019, I would say remote working was very difficult. And it was just the world was not ready for it.
In the engineering world, they had, you're probably familiar with like the tech coding test. I'm not going to name their exact names right now, but that provides like a score and a, assessment of your skills. And there's stuff like that's been popping up on the engineering and programming side. And I think we could see maybe more of that kind of stuff in other types of functions to help do the same thing in other types of work.
That sort of leads me to my other question. Like, I think, there's been a lot of talk about the return to the office. I believe the data shows that it's totally overblown, but, even just the conversation about RTO, is it possible to sort of now put this genie back in the bottle, be like, okay, we're not going to hire across the globe anymore? Or is this like, we're done?
I think managers want people in the office very much, but you certainly, you can never go back to 2019. I do say that to people very frequently. If you give off the attitude that you want it to be 2019 again, that's bad, right? You're just not probably going to be successful because, the genie's out of the bottle, people have the taste for it, that's not going to go away. And then I think people don't like to be told what to do. And as much as this might be tough for New York City people to hear, not everyone wants to move to New York City, not everyone wants to move to San Francisco or London. So there's a lot of appetite to not live in these places. And so I think whether it's you're remote in Singapore or just 1 hour outside of New York, that's still going to be there. And there's going to be just...
Or in Brooklyn, remote.
Or it's going to be just on these companies to figure out what range of hybrid or remote are you going to be okay with.
Let's talk a little bit more broadly about how global hiring affects the larger economy. Obviously, if you are a company in America and you used to hire only people in America versus now all of a sudden you have outposts in Singapore or you have outposts in the Philippines, like what does it do to our economy, those economies?
I think one of the biggest things is like I've been tapping around, places like New York City and San Francisco are going to change. They're not going to be the default destination for early career entry-level people. Which is going to, potentially have a big impact. I think we already are seeing cities within the U.S. and outside of the U.S. growing at a very rapid rate.
More affordable.
Partially
cities?
because of remote employment. There was an article recently about Frisco, Texas, that used to have 6,000 people, and now it has something like over 250,000. Phoenix has become really popular. In Miami has grown a lot. So I think we're going to see that type of growth in other cities around the world as well as the job economy opens up.
I think I wanted to zoom out a little bit outside of US. So what we are doing is, this is not just a US specific problem, it is a problem that is faced across all high GDP per capita countries. So all markets where GDP per capita is very high, you have wages that are also incredibly high, which puts a lot of strain on a business's competitiveness and ability to grow and scale, because you can't have all of your resources stuck with wages. So this gives an avenue for businesses to thrive for two major purposes. One being going overseas to sell more to other markets, which is what a lot of businesses do in terms of moving to London or Singapore, and they say, oh, first things first, I need to explore Asia, so I set up a camp in Singapore, and then I hire a few people in Singapore and grow it across, and one day I will get to Vietnam, Thailand and Malaysia, other secondary markets. That is one major area that I would say we serve very strongly. The other major area is you need work done for yourselves, and that is your typical offshore use case in which India and Philippines have been really popular. We expect this to also be a little bit more pervasive into Latin American markets, because Latin American markets are exactly in the same time zone as US, right? It is perfect to service the American economy. But in those markets specifically, we have found that the payroll costs associated, the statutory contributions, regulations have gotten in the way of building fluidity and allowing the American businesses from hiring people in those markets. And of course, there is English, which is a secondary factor that goes into this. But all in, what this has been doing for economies across the world is that, it allows for a greater amount of transaction velocity. It, reduces friction in doing business. And as a result of that, most, economists would agree that this enables the businesses and economies to grow faster. And that's the crux of it.
Now that we have such a large base of this happening, so many companies of different sizes employing people outside of their country of origin, were there any unexpected benefits, anything that kind of came out of it that we hadn't intended, immediately?
I think companies probably started doing it a lot to spend less on salaries, right? You can, if you are hiring someone from a different country, general thesis
Personnel costs are huge.
general thought is that the salary costs are lower. But I think in terms of unexpected benefits, people are finding that there are really strong pools of talent outside of this country for whether it's engineering or finance or something else. And that they're able to diversify their company in a way as well. So, but I really think filling talent gaps that they previously did not think was there. And again, that competition, Kansas is one area, but if you're in New York or San Francisco, right, that engineering job or that finance associate job, that's a very high salary and a very competitive market. So if you're able to expand that pool of people you're able to look at, you're just more likely to find probably a better fit if your applicant pool is 10,000 people versus 100,000 people.
And you mentioned the skills gap. How is that being addressed? Either within our own markets, outside markets, different countries. How are you seeing that be addressed? Obviously, it's a huge problem. And
yeah, so skills-based is a big, general HR kind of trend that's going on in talent strategy of trying to say, okay, when I'm hiring a manager, and a finance manager, I don't just say I want them to be have been a finance associate for 5 years and then promoted to manager. You want to say, I need you to have these, very tangible skills, and can you prove that you have them as well? And so that skills-based approach is being, applied to recruiting, but also performance management. And I think, starting to look at that more granularly and in a more detailed way.
As opposed to academic based, you mean?
As opposed to, your academic history and your job history.
Got it.
Basically being your whole
your
whole
I
resume.
did these specific things.
I did these things. I
Yeah.
bring these skills, right? And if you like that, I also care about what your company's doing. So I think, again, being really sharper on what you're looking for in recruiting, and what you're looking for from people once they're in the building, you can also start to be sharper about what you're expecting from a external hire who might be from a different country.
So it sounds a bit like this becomes a case of if you're not doing it, you're sort of missing out.
Yes. And I think just wanted to add to what Aman was talking about with respect to the benefits of a solution in terms of global hiring, is that, now we are seeing a lot more jobs and formal job opportunities being delivered to markets across the world. And, every government over the last 100 years has been trying to find ways to create more jobs, right? And that's what we are seeing today, in the sense that, we are enabling those to create more formal job opportunities for countries that didn't really anticipate that amount. And with formal job opportunities comes tax revenue dollars for the purposes of building local infrastructure, specifically across roads, hospitals, and schools.
Have you seen any like drawbacks because of this? Like,
So far, no, which is really interesting. So far, not really. The obvious one, of course, is with American businesses saying they are taking away jobs from here. That being said, over the last 40 odd years, you have seen large offshore markets, specifically India and Philippines, servicing a lot of roles. Yet 40 years later, you still see US unemployment being so low. So it can't really be the case.
I think there are some challenges and risks, not necessarily drawbacks, but there's, of course, challenges. You want to understand your whatever country's legal environment that you're operating within. And then you have to think about the equitable way to do salary and compensation. That's something that comes up in this conversation. If you have two people doing the same job in different countries, but you're paying one person significantly less, that might make sense, but within the world. But does that make sense within the walls of your company?
causing internal strife, right?
Yeah. So again, at larger companies, they have to figure out what they're doing with that.
I think with larger companies, they've also crossed that challenge by, factoring in salaries based on local cost of living. Because foundationally, that is something that we have learned to bifurcate even with us, because we have people in more than 80 countries. The wages that one is offered is more so a function of the cost of living, where that person is situated, than the amount of skills that a person brings. A person living in New York, for example, a finance manager would be earning 100,000 USD. Like 99% of that is going towards the cost of living in New York. And everybody in New York knows that, you're almost always out of pocket because the cost of living is so high. And more often than not, it's the company that is trying to, shall I say, subsidize a person living in that city rather than a person being there. So that is something which I don't know if you're fully capturing, but cost of living plays a part in terms of wages more so than skills. We would have liked to equate it to skills, but no, today it's very much cost of living based.
And we talked about this before, like in preparing for this talk, just the importance of English language speaking. Like, do you want to say anything about that? Just like whether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a like a built-in, if your country had that as part of its culture or school culture or even work culture. Some places that have a lot of hospitality, they had English, and were able to have people find their way into U.S. firms for white-collar work. What we're seeing now is a growth of vendors, starting to do English language training with the purpose being that you understand the English speaking, the English language of the workplace, or a tech, workplace, or a healthcare workplace, so that you can get that kind of job. And, that's a huge part of it. Obviously, it's not just that you need to be in a different location and have the skills. You, of course, still need to communicate with your U.S. Based team. And that's basically, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for people if they have, the engineering or programming or finance, whatever it may be. They can bolster their potential to get hired by boosting their English language skills. And I think a lot of people are doing that.
So like having like Google glasses or Meta glasses, doing live translation, is that going to make up for this English language capability?
Not enough. Not sold.
Not sold yet?
Not sold yet. I think you all can see, right? With video conferencing, there's already a tiny lag in our communication, which doesn't make it so fluid rather than in person. Now you add a third layer, which is AI translator.
Right.
That is going to make it even more fractured, the communication.
Right. And also probably a little confusing. You hear the person, you hear the
so
translation.
that fluidity in communication and the speed at which we are able to interact is what determines GDP growth rates foundationally, right? Go back to transaction velocity. So, that's where English as a common language across the world, and I think most African nations now are also promoting English language within their own countries, and their education systems are also doing that, allowing those countries to be at the forefront of the talent market in the next 5 to 10 years too, which is very crucial.
I know Multiplier has some interesting data on this, but have you seen any interesting hiring trends in different, certain industries going to certain countries? Tell me.
So I think the most interesting trend that came along was that the Philippines is still the biggest market that is supporting the United States businesses today. And
And what kind of jobs? Like, what do you mean? Like,
I'm talking, it's fairly agnostic. You're talking about accounting, HR, marketing, some engineering roles. It's across the board. And it's predominantly because Philippines and San Francisco share the West Coast share very manageable time zone difference. Wages in the Philippines are, I would say, 10% or 15% that of United States. And that makes it a very, very, great market to employ from. Of course, there's also India, which is also served, but this is very heavy on engineering and technology roles. Time zone gaps is much larger, and that presents a bigger challenge. What was most interesting is Canada is also always there in amongst the top 3 markets supporting United States companies today. Yeah.
is there any difference in large versus small companies? Like, are big corporations versus startups adopting global employment more or less than each other?
I would say like the enterprises have been taking advantage of offshore centers for at least 30, 40 years. Visa, MasterCard, Google, Microsoft have had offices in Mexico, India, Philippines for an incredibly...
That was like customer service, though, but you think in a more dramatic way now.
Yes, they're also now building a lot more stuff because you have such a big pool, and they're also recognizing that talent is everywhere. And foundationally, it also costs so much to physically import people to their HQs. So they have sufficiently large numbers to hire in market nowadays. Where we have seen the greatest amount of change is with small and medium-sized businesses over the last 4 or 5 years, thanks to an EOR solution like Multipliers. We've seen a lot of SMEs participate in building global teams.
I think that's very interesting when you think about it. Like 10, 15 years ago, if you were a startup in San Francisco, all of your employees, right, had to be in that San Francisco area. So, employees 1 through 25 are right there or whatever. That's completely turned on its head now, right? So you can start a startup in San Francisco, employees 1 through 10 can be all over the world, and you found, again, ideally, maybe even better fit talent than you might have found in your immediate geographic area. So this is a huge potential, lift for any type of startup or small business to be able to say, I'm no longer bound to my immediate area. And yeah, larger corporations have always had some access to global markets, but smaller did not have it as much. And I think that's what's really changed now.
So one of the big elephants in the room when we're talking about any sort of software, any jobs in general, is just AI, the threat of like AI taking all of our jobs, doing the work of white collar workers. And, you're in the business of helping people employ people around the world. Like, how do you think about AI? Are you more of it's going to take our jobs, or it's going to make our jobs just different?
I think it's absolutely going to take jobs. Software and technology has done that. We have a lot of evidence of, jobs like typist or bookkeeper, going away and being phased out. But yeah, with it comes new jobs, right?
Hopefully.
50 years ago, we didn't have as many yoga instructors and dog walkers as we do now. And I mean, I genuinely do think actually recreation and leisure is an industry that's going to grow because there's going to be more types of ways to spend your money and do things.
I think I want to wrap up a little bit and see if you have any advice, talking about AI, advice to both employees and employers of how to sort of future-proof themselves, got to stay ahead in all of this, in global hiring and AI, and just like the really dynamic job economy that we're in right now.
I would say for employees, really refine your skill set. Think about those unique things you bring to the table. Be honest with yourself about what those skills are, how you can prove them, and what you can really, what you would really want to and can do in a business setting. For employers, it's to be open-minded about where your next great employee can come from. I think just being open-minded can open up a lot of doors just in terms of the type of people you look at, where those people are located, and then how you work, whether it's hybrid or remote. You can't just go hire people from around the world and benefit from it. You have to have the structure that allows those type of workers to succeed as well. So really think about what are your onboarding, your management procedures, and how do you make sure that hybrid and remote people are included in those and supported through those as well.
Yes. Fully agreed with what Aman said. I think now we are seeing a phase called the Great Reluctance.
We love coining things.
I know.
Sorry.
Thought it was quite appropriate. So essentially, now we see that, AI applications are coming through hot and fast. People are not really applying it hot and fast. And it's really that foundational fear in people that is AI going to take my jobs? But as what Aman said, what's going to happen is AI will transform a lot of how people interact with work, what sort of job functionalities and roles that will come about. So things will change and things will evolve. When SaaS came along, I think 10, 15 years ago, everyone thought that, we don't need people. Now there is SaaS. Unfortunately, we still need people to do so many things. So even with AI, it will really change the nature of a lot of people's work. It's a great tool that everyone needs to use on the daily, and it's incumbent on everybody to be responsible, to know what to do with AI and to quickly get it done. Yeah.
I want to thank you guys both so much for speaking with me today and answering all my questions. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.